Boom! Screencast-o-matic, man. Here we are, European colonies in America. This is PowerPoint number 2 for us. That is probably not what you want to see. You don't really want to see the presenter view now, do you? Let me fix that for you, and we will be on our way. All right, so what you want to see is this, European colonies in America. So here's the deal, man. We did the first day. We did our little colonial dig. And we talked about how these people came over, the Europeans came over to the New World. And specifically, the countries we're talking about right now are Spain, France, Netherlands, and Great Britain. To be frankly honest with you, man, the United States has a huge, giant Spanish influence on it, huge, giant French, and massive English influence on us. Netherlands' influence isn't quite as so great because they weren't here for so long. They kind of got their territory stolen away from them. But we do still bear a lot of our customs today from Spain, France, and Great Britain. So the learning objectives are you need to know the motivations for these countries and the structure and of their governments and economies. All right, man. European colonial in America. There was a massive desire for new trade routes. Spain and Portugal were given the line of demarcation by the Pope. Portugal going to explore this part of the line, and Spain this part of the line. Well, people started coming over to North America when they found out that there's a ton of land here and it's pretty much open for the taking. The Native Americans were here. They were far less advanced. You guys all know that. And unfortunately, one of the worst parts of United States history is the Native Americans were pretty much, culture was decimated by the Europeans. The Europeans were, they valued different things than the Native Americans did. The Europeans were valuing money and valuing raw materials. And the Native Americans were just valuing land and didn't believe that people could own land, believed that the land belonged to everyone. It shows you here how the Spaniards colonized a lot in the area that's modern-day Mexico and Latin America, some of northern South America, and our southwest parts of our country. The southwestern part of the United States of America still bears a super heavy influence on from the Spaniards. Up here, you see the English are in orange, man. The English settled the entire eastern seaboard of America. The French settled Canada and crept down into the Mississippi River Valley, and like New Orleans, for example. New Orleans is the perfect example of a city that bears French influence to this day. The motivations were after Columbus came over, Spanish conquistadors or conquerors were searching for gold and silver. And then Spanish missionaries were trying to convert the Native Americans to Catholicism. And actually, they believed that they were doing the Native Americans a favor. They thought, hey, man, we're actually, quote-unquote, saving these Native Americans. Some of the different explorations. The Spanish government encouraged converting Indians and establishing missions. And all of these things are known as, every red dot's known as a presidio. A presidio is a Spanish outpost that basically has a priest living there, and the priest's job is to befriend the Native Americans in the area and try to convert them to Catholicism. Some of the presidios were really super nice and in touch with some of the religious teachings, and other presidios were not so nice, and they acted as conquerors towards the Native Americans. So there is no rule across the board about how the Native Americans felt towards the presidios. Some of the Native Americans liked them, and some of the Native Americans thought they were hostile. It just depended on how the priests living in the area treated the natives. All right, so we got government, royal control. Spanish colonies were funded and controlled by the monarch. And then the viceroy is the guy that kind of lived in the New World and carried out the monarch's orders. So that viceroy, a lot of the times the viceroy, I think they set up their base in Cuba. And so from Cuba, they would kind of call the shots on all the Spanish lands in the New World. The Indian and African slave labor was used to mine for gold and silver. So we would actually enslave the natives and use them to mine. And we actually, when I say we, the Spaniards, because I'm not Spanish, the Spaniards would actually enslave the natives, and the Spaniards would actually go and bring slaves over to the New World to try to find that gold and silver. There was encomiendas, which is just a large plantation. And they began to farm things such as cash crops down in Latin America and Mexico. Again, the Spanish colonies were strictly controlled by the viceroys. We had the Creole were white colonists living in Spanish colonies that had opportunities for land and wealth, but there's a huge lack of women. There's a lot of intermarrying with Indians, which led to mestizo culture in America, which is white culture or European culture blended with the Native American cultures. Indians and African slaves made, in terms of a social hierarchy, the bottom of the social hierarchy. And then here you go. This is the chart. All right, so you got Spanish colonies down here. French colonies are everything in the purple, and then the English colonies are in orange, again, Spanish in here. So we're going to discuss these right here. The French came in and really took over the St. Lawrence River, the Great Lake area, and then the French came in and took over the Mississippi River Valley. After Samuel de Champlain's attempt to find a Northwest Passage, because the reason why Canada was colonized by the French was because the French were trying to find a Northwest Passage around America, and then they found out when they got way up here, it's too icy to actually cross. Samuel de Champlain kind of came down the St. Lawrence River and was trying to sail through the Great Lakes. Then eventually they walked over here and tried to sail through the Mississippi River, never found the Northwest Passage. But the French Crescent, as it's known as, was Canada, Mississippi River, New Orleans. Missionaries, again, there was a lot of French missionaries that were utilizing Catholicism, and if you go back to this map, all the yellow dots are the French missionaries. Oh, it's right here. Like Spain, the French government encouraged converting Indians. And you actually saw some of that on your archaeological dig. You saw some of those priests converting Indians. That was one of the archaeological artifacts that you were supposed to be identifying was, I think it was like a French priest was preaching to some Native Americans up in Canada. Government of the French colonies was also under royal control. The French colonies were strictly controlled by royal governors. These royal governors were making their money with the fur trade. Fur trade was a big deal for the French. That was their main source of money. The thing about it is, and France became like the center of like, boom, fashion. Woo! It's like, hey man, I got my fur coat. Oh, I look so good. I'm on the French runway. Oh, you want to see my runway walk? That's my French runway walk right there. And you know what? So we had a lot of cool animals here. And the Native Americans were killing the animals. They don't have those in France. They send them back over, and they're rare. I was like, we got all these foxes and minxes and all kinds of deer and all kinds of crazy stuff. And all of a sudden, you know, French people are known for fashion because they set up a fur trade with the Native Americans. So they were the society was really friendly with the natives. Like they all had a beneficial relationship. Hey, we'll give you some guns, you give us some furs, boom. And that's the way they had it, man. Look, these guys are friends, man. They're smoking the peace pipe together right there. And again, he's trading them some furs for some guns, making some moolah right there. The Dutch, there were Dutch people. The Dutch people came over, New Netherlands, and set up, they actually colonized New York. Also colonized down here in the Delaware Bay. So these two areas were colonized by the Dutch, and they set up a lot of farmland in there. But the Dutch established New Amsterdam as a trade center. They allowed anyone to emigrate. Like they're taking in people from any religion. They're taking people in from any country, not just their own country. And so they were one of the more diverse colonies in North America. And again, this is actually good farmland right here because it's right on the Delaware River. So a lot of farmland here. Also set up on the Hudson River. Lots of farmland here, and they established what became New York City. Eventually, New York City obviously gets taken over by the British. All right, and then the British, there's a lot of reasons. I always say there's two main reasons that the British came here. You got the Pilgrims that were coming for religious freedom, and then you got the Jamestown settlers that were coming to make money. They were a joint stock company, and they were coming just to make some money. And so you have those two major reasons. You also have the political reasons. Fear during the English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution. People were just trying to escape for political reasons as well. So the British colonies were very different from each other. They were never really feeling like, nobody was really getting away from Britain saying, yes, we're going to conquer land for Great Britain. People were coming over here because, oh, I'm escaping religious persecution. Oh, I just want to make money for myself. Oh, I want to get away from political persecution. So no one's really coming over here to represent Britain. A lot of people were coming over here just to escape some bad situations in Britain and just kind of trying to make their own world. So the colonies in Great Britain all differed because the British government had no desire to create some centralized empire. All they wanted was a mercantilistic relationship in which the colonies were providing raw materials for the British to make money. So Britain developed this policy called salutary neglect. I always explain salutary neglect this way. I say this: Pope High School has a dress code. When you go to face-to-face school, You know, not every teacher always enforces the dress code. It's it's written down, it's on paper, but it's up to us to enforce it. If we don't enforce the dress code and we let you break the law, well, that's called salutary neglect. Now, there's a reason why we may not enforce the dress code and allow you to break that law, and it might be because it makes a more harmonious society. If we're just picking on you about your dress all the time, you know, you're going to be upset. You're going to be angry. And it may not be worth the fight. Maybe it actually helps to it helps you to be comfortable in school. For whatever the reason, if we're just always hammering you on the dress code, you know, it may not be beneficial. The same was true for the British. The British had all kinds of laws on the books, all kinds of things. You have to trade with Great Britain. You got to use British trade ships. You got to pay this tax, that tax, the other. They wrote these all down. They did not enforce them. So basically, each colony established its own trade relationships with different countries in Europe. So some colonies would trade with France, some would trade with Spain, some would trade with England. And England allowed that to happen because England's making their money. Eventually, this salutary neglect becomes one of the reasons for the Revolutionary War. Because England comes in and says, you know what, we're not making as much money as we could. We're going to start hammering you and forcing us to trade with only us because that's what the law says. And the people of the colony are like, dude, you haven't enforced that law in like 100 years. We're not going to obey it. You're out of your mind. It would be the same exact thing if all of a sudden we just let you wear whatever crop top or shorts you wanted to wear, and then we just started hammering you about changing your clothes every day. You guys would probably be pretty upset. Matter of fact, that actually did happen once at Pope, and next thing you know, there's we're finding ourselves on the news, I think, if I remember correctly. All right, royal governors were sent to each colony in the British colonies. They were sent by the king. They didn't have that much power, and the reason being is because they were paid by the colonies. So the colonial legislatures actually had to pay the royal governors, and the colonial legislators were like, oh, if you don't do what we say, we're just not going to pay you. And so this was kind of the setup right here. You had the British crown, the royal governor. The colonial assembly is elected by eligible colonists, made laws, and what you can't see down here below the screencast, it says pays governor's salary, but you can't see that because it got cut off by the screencast. The economy, again, the societies and economies of the British colonies were dependent upon the reasons why they settled and also the area in which they were located. So if I had to go in a broad overview, this is all farmland, man. There's fertile farmland down here that these guys and ladies are growing crops. These are known as the southern colonies. The middle colonies, well, there's some good farmland here, like in Delaware and some parts of New Jersey and Pennsylvania, but they're also doing shipping and commerce up here in New York, maybe even a little bit of fishing. And then you get up into these areas, New England colonies. Well, there's not great farmland in New England colonies. They're doing a ton of shipping. This is where a lot of the trade and the shipping's happens. Also, a lot of the fishing and whaling are occurring up here in New England, catching some crabs, lobsters, whales, whatever it might be. So based on the geography, because it is a huge geographical expanse, based on the geography, there's different types of economies. So again, southern colonies that cash crops. New England colonies like Massachusetts were closely connected by religion, families, subsistence farmers who had little desire to make money in some cases. And unlike the Spanish and French, the British colonists never made sweeping attempts to convert, marry, or trade with local Native Americans, although conflicts over land were common. One of the things about the English colonies that's unique, you know, Spaniards and French were Catholic, so they're attracting a lot of the Catholic people, and the grand majority of Christians in the world at that point in time were practicing Catholicism. You know, the English had the Church of the Anglican Church. And so most of the colonies are only open to Protestants. They weren't even welcoming to Catholicism because they felt like, well, if we start attracting a lot of Catholics, then the French people and Spanish people are going to pour into our colonies. We don't want that. The only colony open to Catholics was Maryland. So Lord Baltimore allowed Catholics into the colony of Maryland. If you were Catholic, you basically had to go to France or you had to go to Spain, but not to the English colonies. Bam! We'll cover that in class. I'll answer questions about that in class. You need to crush out that note sheet I gave that you have with it, the guided notes. Congratulations.